The US federal government shut down Wednesday at midnight amid a bitter spending deadlock between President Donald Trump and Democrats in the US Congress. This is the third major shutdown of the US government in recent years, and this time it is expected to deeply disrupt federal services. It will also leave many federal workers furloughed, which is that they are placed on temporary unpaid leave. This was the first federal shutdown of the US government since 2019. Back then, parts of the US government were shut down for 35 days in a standoff between the Democrats and President Trump over the president's demand to fund a wall at the southern border with Mexico. This time, the dispute is over Democrats and their demand that the president agree to extend healthcare subsidies, which would expire by the end of the year, and also restore cuts that have been made to Medicaid enacted over the summer as part of Trump's marquee Big Beautiful Bill. The shutdown became all but inevitable on Tuesday night after the Senate Democrats voted just hours before the midnight deadline. They blocked the Republican plan to keep federal fund flowing. It was a 55-45 vote. The GOP plan would have extended funding through to November, but it fell short of the 60 votes, the two-thirds majority that's required for passage of this bill. Republicans also blocked a Democratic plan which would have extended the funding through to the end of October and add $1 more trillion to healthcare spending. Hence, there was no option but a government shutdown.
Republicans are plunging America into a shutdown, rejecting bipartisan talks, pushing a partisan bill, and risking America's health care, worst of all. A few moments ago, Republicans once again rejected Democrats' proposals to avoid a shutdown, fix health care premiums, and spare Americans the calamity of skyrocketing through the roof health care costs. Republicans blocked it again.
But instead of any negotiation between the Democrats and the Republicans, lawmakers on both parties spent hours before the deadline pointing fingers at each other for the shutdown crisis. Trump issued threats from the White House. He appeared to relish the prospect of a shutdown, which he said he would use to hurt the Democrats. He said he would move during the shutdown to enact measures that would be, quote, bad for the Democrats.
Well, the Democrats want to shut it down, so when you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats. As you know, this country, no country can afford to pay for illegal immigration, health care for everybody that comes into the country, and that's what they're insisting. And obviously I have an obligation to not accept that. That would affect everybody.
Back in March, a clutch of Senate Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, allowed a stopgap spending bill to pass through, and that prompted an outpouring of anger from liberal voters. This time, the Democrats have picked up a fight with Trump on health care. They believe this is an issue which repeatedly various polls have shown that the Democrats have an upper hand on, unlike immigration or law and order and other issues that the Republican base cares about. If the Obamacare tax credits are allowed to lapse by the end of the year, about 4 million people are projected to lose insurance coverage. And the prices of drugs will go up an additional 20% for 20 million people more. Trump and other Republicans continue to hammer at the accusation that Democrats were shutting down the government in order to give health care benefits to unauthorized immigrants. Trump even posted a meme making fun of House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries wearing a Mexican hat to Mexican music. The US government runs on an annual budget that must be passed by the Congress and it must be signed off by the president. If the Congress fails to pass about a dozen appropriations bills, a stopgap measure called a continuing resolution is then passed. If neither of this happens by the start of the financial year, which is the 1st of October every year, and if the president refuses to sign that, then the federal government runs out of the authority to spend any money. That leads to a shutdown where non-essential federal operations are put on pause until funding is restored. Essential services like national security, active military operations, airport security, border patrol, and federal prisons will continue to function despite the shutdown, but many other non-essential services get disrupted. National parks, museums, monuments are closed, federal workers are sent home without pay, and passport and visa processing slows down. The last major shutdown was in 2019 under President Donald Trump in his first term. That shutdown lasted 35 days, which is the longest in American history. The dispute was over Trump's demand for $5 billion in funding for a US-Mexico border wall. The Democrats had opposed it. This time, the shutdown could go on for longer, and that is because the position between the two main parties has become even more extreme. The Democrats have swung far too much to the left, to the progressive wing of the party led by the likes of New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC. And the same dynamic is at play in the grand old party, the Republican Party, which has lurched further to the right under Trump, and it no longer sees a room for compromise. In the end, it is the American voter and the American tax-paying public that is left in the lurch.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.